Picture this: a bustling city, alive with the sounds of market vendors, children laughing, the hum of daily life. Then, one day, it's gone. Not slowly, not over years, but vanished overnight. Streets lie empty, homes untouched, meals half-eaten. No signs of war, no evidence of panic, just silence. This isn't fiction. It's a reality that has haunted historians and archaeologists for generations. Across the ancient world, from the jungles of Central America to the deserts of the Middle East, entire cities were abandoned in what seems like the blink of an eye. What could force thousands of people to leave everything behind without a trace? The answers are as mysterious as the disappearances themselves, and today we're diving deep into the enigma of these lost civilizations. Some of the greatest minds in archaeology have spent decades piecing together clues: a collapsed wall here, a layer of ash there, strange markings on ancient tablets. But the truth remains elusive. Was it a natural disaster, a sudden plague, or something even more inexplicable? Take the ancient city of Cahokia, for example. Located near modern-day St. Louis, it was once the largest settlement north of Mexico, home to tens of thousands. Then, around the year 1400, it was empty. No records, no stories passed down, just a ghost city waiting to be rediscovered centuries later. Or consider the Indus Valley civilization, with its advanced plumbing and grid-like streets, only to be abandoned without explanation. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a pattern that stretches across continents and cultures, leaving us with more questions than answers. What makes these abandonments so fascinating isn't just the mystery, it's what they reveal about us. Human civilizations rise, flourish, and then sometimes vanish without warning. Were these ancient people fleeing something we still don't understand? Did they see signs we'd missed today? As we explore these sites, we're not just uncovering lost cities, we're piecing together the fragile nature of human society itself. So join me as we step into the shadows of history, retracing the footsteps of those who disappeared and uncovering the secrets they left behind. This isn't just a story about the past, it's a clue to our own future. There's an eerie power in walking through the ruins of a forgotten city, standing where people once lived, loved, and built their dreams, only to vanish without a trace. It's not just the mystery that grips us, it's the unsettling realization that civilizations, no matter how grand, aren't permanent. Think of the legends that have endured for centuries, like Atlantis, swallowed by the sea in a single night. Whether myth or reality, these stories tap into something primal, the fear that everything we've built could one day be reduced to whispers and rubble. But why do these abandoned cities hold such sway over our imagination? Part of it lies in the unanswered questions. When we look at Cahokia's towering mounds or the intricate streets of the Indus Valley, we're confronted with the limits of our knowledge. These weren't backward societies, they were advanced, organized, even brilliant in their own ways. Yet they disappeared so completely that later generations stumbled upon their ruins with no memory of who built them. It's as if history itself hit a pause button, leaving us to piece together fragments of a puzzle with half the pieces missing. And then there's the human element. These weren't just cities, they were homes. Families gathered around fires, traders haggled in markets, children played in courtyards. When we walk those empty streets today, we're not just seeing abandoned buildings, we're confronting the ghostly echo of lives interrupted. That's what makes these sites so haunting. They force us to ask, what would it take for us to leave everything behind? A natural disaster, a sudden plague, or something we can't even imagine? Perhaps that's the deepest fascination of all. These ruins are mirrors reflecting our own fragility. Every society believes it's the pinnacle of progress until it isn't. The crumbling walls of Angkor Wat or the silent plazas of Teotihuacan remind us that time is the great equalizer. So when we study these lost cities, we're not just uncovering the past. We're grappling with the uneasy truth that our own cities, our own civilizations, might one day become someone else's mystery. The Maya civilization stands as one of history's greatest enigmas, a society that reached dazzling heights of art, astronomy, and architecture, only to see its grandest cities swallowed by the jungle. At their peak, Maya metropolises like Tikal and Palenque thrived with towering pyramids, bustling marketplaces, and intricate calendars that tracked time with astonishing precision. Yet by the 9th century, these urban centers fell silent. No invading armies, no scorched earth, just empty plazas where life once pulsed. The question isn't just why the Maya declined, but why their abandonment was so sudden, so complete, that later generations didn't even recall who built these stone wonders. Climate holds one crucial clue. Tree rings and sediment cores reveal that the Maya heartland suffered brutal droughts during their collapse, decades-long dry spells that would have withered crops and drained reservoirs. Imagine a civilization built on maize, suddenly watching fields turn to dust. But drought alone doesn't explain why scribes in some cities kept writing until the very end, or why certain elites clung to power while others fled. This was no single catastrophe. It was a slow unraveling where environmental stress exposed the cracks in Maya society. Warfare likely accelerated the crisis. In the final years, city-states that once traded jade and obsidian began erecting walls and carving monuments boasting of captured rivals. Kings who claimed divine authority couldn't stop the rains from failing, and as faith in their power waned, so did social order. Yet even this doesn't fully explain why some cities were abandoned mid-construction, or why precious jade ornaments were left scattered on palace floors. There's a haunting intimacy to these sites, as if families walked away expecting to return. Recent discoveries suggest the truth may lie in the interplay of all these forces. A prolonged drought could have sparked food shortages, fueling conflicts between desperate cities. Political collapse might have disrupted trade networks, making recovery impossible. By the time the rains returned, the damage was done, knowledge lost, populations scattered. The Maya didn't vanish, they adapted, migrating to new lands or blending into other cultures. But their great cities, those were sacrifices to time, monuments to the unsettling truth that no civilization, no matter how brilliant, is immune to the perfect storm of disaster. The lesson of the Maya isn't just in their fall, but in how many warning signs we recognize today: climate shifts, strained resources, social fractures. Their stones whisper a warning across the centuries. Rising from the floodplains of the Mississippi River, Cahokia was a marvel of the ancient world, a sprawling metropolis of earthen mounds, bustling plazas, and a population that rivaled medieval London at its peak. At its heart stood Monk's Mound, a colossal structure larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza at its base. This was no isolated village. It was the nerve center of a vast trade network, where copper from the Great Lakes and seashells from the Gulf Coast changed hands. Yet by the 1400s, the grand plazas fell silent. The question isn't just why Cahokia collapsed, but how a city so powerful could fade so completely from memory, leaving even its true name lost to time. Drought seems the obvious villain. Tree rings tell a story of punishing dry spells in the 1300s, a time when Cahokia's farmers would have watched their maize fields wither under relentless sun. But climate alone doesn't explain the finer details, like why evidence of large feasts persists even as the city declined. or why some neighborhoods were abandoned methodically while others show signs of frantic departure. Archaeologists have found homes with tools left behind as if mid-task and storage pits emptied in haste. This wasn't a single catastrophic event. It was a slow unraveling where each challenge compounded the next. Social unrest likely accelerated the crisis. In Cahokia's final decades, a once open city became fortified, with wooden stockades slicing through neighborhoods. Burials reveal increasing violence, mass graves with bodies bearing arrow wounds and blunt force trauma. Was it internal strife as overcrowding strained resources? Or raids from rival groups as the region grew desperate? The answer might lie in Cahokia's greatest strength, its diversity. The city drew people from across the continent, united under ambitious rulers who built monuments to their power. When drought weakened that unity, the social contract may have shattered. Yet the most haunting clue isn't in the violence or the droughts, it's in the quiet resilience of those who remained. Long after the elites left, small groups clung to the city's edges, adapting as the Mississippi shifted its course. They didn't vanish, they transformed, blending into new cultures. Cahokia's legacy isn't just in its fall, but in how it echoes a universal truth. Even the grandest civilizations are fragile ecosystems, where environment, leadership, and chance collide. Walking its empty mounds today, we're left wondering, if a society this advanced could disappear so utterly, what does that mean for our own cities? The earth here remembers what history forgot. Buried beneath the dust of millennia, the cities of the Indus Valley whisper secrets we're still struggling to decipher. Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa weren't just settlements, they were masterpieces of ancient engineering with grid-patterned streets, advanced drainage systems, and standardized bricks that fit together like pieces of a puzzle. This was a civilization that thrived for nearly 1,000 years, trading with Mesopotamia and perfecting urban living long before Rome or Athens existed. Yet around 1900 BCE, the bustling streets fell quiet. No burnt layers from invading armies, no mass graves from plagues, just an eerie stillness that puzzles archaeologists to this day. What makes the Indus Valley's collapse so baffling is the lack of obvious disaster. In Mohenjo-Daro, archaeologists have found no evidence of violent conflict, no weapons piled in streets, no fortifications hastily built. Even stranger, precious artifacts like jewelry and tools were often left undisturbed, as if people simply walked away from their lives. Some point to the Saraswati River, a once mighty waterway referenced in ancient texts that may have dried up, stranding cities that depended on its flow. Satellite imagery reveals old riverbeds snaking through the region, hinting at a landscape reshaped by nature's whims. But was this enough to unravel an entire civilization? Others argue the decline was slower, a quiet unraveling. As trade routes shifted or resources dwindled, the tightly knit social fabric may have frayed. Unlike the Maya or Cahokia, there's no grand monuments glorifying kings. Indus Valley cities lacked palaces or temples, suggesting a society built on collective governance rather than central authority. Without a ruling class to enforce order, could small stresses, a failed harvest, a silted-up harbor, have cascaded into irreversible change? The answers might lie in the script they left behind, a writing system that remains undeciphered, its symbols holding stories we can't yet read. Perhaps the most haunting clue is what happened after the cities emptied. Unlike other lost civilizations, the Indus Valley people didn't vanish entirely. Pottery styles and crafts resurface in smaller villages, suggesting a quiet migration rather than a catastrophic end. This wasn't a collapse, it was a transformation, a society adapting until its grand urban identity faded into memory. Walking the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro today, you're left with a profound question. How does a civilization so advanced, so meticulously planned, simply choose to walk away? The stones offer no answers, only the echo of footsteps that never returned. Nature doesn't always give warnings. One moment, a city thrives, the next, it's buried under ash or swallowed by the earth. Pompeii's fate is etched into history, its streets frozen in time by Mount Vesuvius's eruption in 79 AD. But what about cities that vanished without such a dramatic record? Across the ancient world, geological clues hint at disasters so sudden, so devastating, they may have erased entire communities from memory in a single night. Take the Minoan city of Akrathi on the island of Santorini. Around 1600 BCE, this vibrant trading hub was buried under layers of volcanic pumice, not from lava, but from a cataclysmic eruption that may have inspired the legend of Atlantis. Archaeologists found homes with frescoes still bright, furniture intact, even jars of grain left behind. Unlike Pompeii, there are no human remains, suggesting the Minoans had enough warning to flee. But where did they go? No records survive, and the eruption's aftermath likely triggered tsunamis that wrecked coastal cities across the Mediterranean. Akrathi's abandonment wasn't just a local tragedy, it was a ripple effect that may have crippled an entire civilization. Then there's the mystery of Helike, a Greek city said to have been swallowed by the sea in 373 BCE. Ancient writers described earthquakes and a massive wave that dragged buildings underwater overnight. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as myth until the 1990s, when archaeologists found Helike's ruins buried under coastal sediment. The discovery confirmed a terrifying truth. A sudden shift in the coastline, possibly triggered by an earthquake, sank the city in hours. Unlike Pompeii's ash-preserved snapshot, Helike's ruins are fragmented, its story scrambled by centuries of tides. But not all disasters leave such obvious scars. In Turkey's Cappadocia region, underground cities like Derinkuyu stretch deep into the earth, their tunnels capable of sheltering thousands. Why build such elaborate refuges? The answer may lie in nearby volcanic peaks. Layers of ash in the soil suggest repeated eruptions forced people underground for survival. Some tunnels show signs of hasty abandonment, tools dropped, doors left ajar. Did one final eruption drive them out, or did the threat simply become too constant? Unlike Pompeii's singular catastrophe, these cities' whisper of lives lived under perpetual siege from the skies. The terrifying power of these events isn't just in their destruction, it's in their randomness. A city might stand for centuries only to vanish in a day, and without written records, even the most meticulous archaeology can't always distinguish between a disaster and the slow decline that followed. A flood might topple walls, but it's the loss of crops, the collapse of trade, the shattered faith in leaders that ultimately empties the streets. Nature doesn't just destroy cities, it unravels the very threads that hold societies together. When we walk these ruins today, we're not just seeing the aftermath of disaster, we're stepping into the moment when the world as they knew it simply ended. Drought is a silent killer, not with the sudden fury of a volcano or earthquake, but with the slow, relentless squeeze of a land turning to dust. The Acadian Empire, one of history's first great civilizations, learned this the hard way. 4,200 years ago, their empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to modern-day Turkey, a powerhouse of trade and culture. Then the rain stopped. Ancient records speak of dust clouds darkening the sun and rivers shrinking to trickles. Within decades, cities like Tel Leilon were abandoned, their streets buried under layers of wind-blown silt. But here's the twist: drought alone didn't doom the Acadians. Archaeologists found evidence of mass migrations. with refugees crowding into surviving cities until even those collapsed under the strain. It wasn't just the lack of water, it was the unraveling of everything that depended on it. The Anasazi of the American Southwest faced a similar reckoning. Their cliffside villages, like Mesa Verde, were marvels of adaptation, with reservoirs carved into sandstone to catch every precious drop. Yet by the 1300s, these dwellings stood empty. Tree rings from the era tell a harrowing story, a 50-year drought, the worst in centuries. But again, the full picture is more complex. In some Anasazi sites, storage rooms were sealed shut from the outside, as if to protect supplies for a return that never happened. Others show signs of violence: burned buildings, shattered skulls. Drought didn't just starve them, it fractured their social bonds, turning neighbors against each other in a desperate scramble for survival. What these stories reveal is a pattern. Environmental crises rarely work alone. Take the Maya, whose collapse we've touched on earlier. While drought withered their crops, it was the combination of overpopulation, warfare, and failing leadership that turned a crisis into a catastrophe. A Maya king might blame the gods for the lack of rain, but his people would remember the failed policies that left granaries empty. This interplay is key. When the land turns hostile, societies don't just face hunger, they face impossible choices. Do they ration food, risking rebellion? Do they raid neighbors, inviting retaliation? Or do they simply walk away, hoping some other place might be kinder? Modern archaeology offers eerie parallels. In Syria, a drought from 2006 to 2010 devastated farmland, driving millions into cities and exacerbating tensions that erupted into civil war. The past reminds us that environmental stress doesn't just test a civilization's resources, it tests its very fabric. When wells run dry and crops fail, trust evaporates faster than water. That's the real lesson of these abandoned cities. They didn't just run out of rain, they ran out of time to adapt. And as we face our own changing climate, their ruins stand as stark reminders. Civilizations don't fall when the land dies. They fall when the people stop believing they can survive it. War leaves scars, sometimes in shattered walls and mass graves, other times in whispers and empty streets. The ancient city of Hattusa, capital of the mighty Hittite Empire, tells both stories. Around 1200 BCE, this fortress city in modern-day Turkey burned so fiercely that clay tablets in its archives baked into permanence, preserving diplomatic correspondence for 3,000 years. Yet there's no evidence of a prolonged siege or last stand. Instead, the ruins suggest something more unsettling: a strategic retreat. The Hittites may have abandoned their capital before enemies arrived, torching it themselves to deny rivals any prize. If true, it's a rare glimpse into the psychology of collapse, not defeat but deliberate disappearance. Other cities vanish without even the dignity of flames. Take the enigmatic case of Great Zimbabwe, a sprawling stone metropolis in southern Africa that thrived on gold trade until the 15th century. Portuguese explorers later stumbled upon its towers and whispered of a lost kingdom, yet local oral traditions held no memory of its builders. Archaeologists found no layers of ash or broken weapons, just empty halls where wealth once flowed. Some speculate that shifting trade routes drained its lifeblood, leaving the city to fade quietly. But another theory hints at a subtler violence: assimilation. The ruling elite may have merged with neighboring groups, their identity dissolving like salt in water until even their name was forgotten. Then there's the haunting mystery of the Moche in Peru. Their pyramids and intricate irrigation systems suggest a society at its peak, until around 800 AD, when their cities were abandoned amid signs of both climate chaos and conflict. At the site of Huaca de la Luna, murals depict ritual battles while skeletal remains show brutal injuries. But here's the twist: the Moche didn't just collapse, they transformed. Their artistic styles reappear in later cultures, suggesting conquest wasn't annihilation so much as reinvention. When a society leaves no written records, the line between invasion and evolution blurs. What unites these stories is the ghostly absence of clear endings. Unlike Troy or Carthage, cities famously razed, many abandonments leave archaeologists puzzling over gaps. A broken gate might mean an army stormed through, or that residents dismantled it as they left. Jewelry buried in haste could signal flight from violence or a hopeful stash for a return that never came. Warfare doesn't always leave corpses. Sometimes it leaves voids where the real tragedy isn't in the bones we find, but in the voices we'll never hear. These cities challenge our obsession with dramatic falls, reminding us that history's quietest exits are often its most chilling. Disease moves differently than war or drought, not with the clash of swords or the crack of parched earth, but with the silent creep of fever through crowded streets. The plague of Justinian in the 6th century wiped out nearly half of Constantinople's population in a matter of months. Bodies piled so high that the emperor ordered them dumped into fortified towers, the stench of decay hanging over the city like a shroud. But what happens when an outbreak strikes a place with no scribes to record it, no empire to organize mass graves? The answer might lie in places like Haman Mangha, a Neolithic village in northeastern China where archaeologists uncovered a single house filled with 97 skeletons, men, women, and children, their bodies haphazardly stacked as if deposited in terrified haste. No signs of trauma, no evidence of fire, just a communal grave whispering of a horror that swept through so fast there was no time for ceremony. Some abandonments leave even subtler clues. In the ruins of Tikal, one of the great Maya cities, researchers found water reservoirs contaminated with layers of toxic algae, a potential breeding ground for waterborne illnesses. Imagine a society already strained by drought, now grappling with sickness that turns life-sustaining cisterns into death traps. Unlike the dramatic imagery of plague masks and mass graves in medieval Europe, ancient epidemics often vanish into the archaeological record, leaving only indirect traces. A sudden drop in pottery production might hint at a decimated workforce. Child burials clustered in a single decade could signal a disease targeting the young. These aren't the smoking guns of history, they're the faint fingerprints of catastrophe. Yet the deadliest epidemics might not be the ones that kill, but the ones that unravel. When the Black Death ravaged 14th century Europe, it didn't just claim lives, it shattered economies, upended social hierarchies, and sparked waves of persecution. Apply that lens to antiquity. A city like Mohenjo-Daro, with its tightly packed neighborhoods, could have seen trade collapse as neighboring regions barred its merchants. Fear might have driven families to flee into the countryside, fragmenting the delicate web of specialization that kept urban life afloat. Disease doesn't just empty cities, it erases the trust that holds them together. But here's the haunting twist: sometimes the abandonment itself becomes a survival strategy. Oral histories from the American Southwest describe ancestral pueblones scattering during times of sickness, breaking into smaller groups to outrun contagion. It's a brutal calculus: sacrifice the city to save the people. Modern epidemiology even has a term for it: cordoning sanitaire, the idea of isolating the infected to protect the whole. Could that explain why some ancient sites show no signs of struggle, just orderly departures? Not panic, but a collective decision to walk away. The challenge for archaeologists is distinguishing disease from other calamities. A layer of ash might clearly signal a volcano, but a mass grave could mean war, famine, or plague. At Tel Brak in Syria, a mound of skeletons from 4,200 years ago shows victims clutching their stomachs, a possible clue to intestinal disease. Yet without DNA analysis, certainty remains elusive. These silent killers leave behind no manifestos, no battle plans, just the echo of a question. How many vanished cities are monuments not to conquest or climate, but to the relentless, invisible march of a pathogen? The ruins don't answer. They simply remind us that sometimes the deadliest threats are the ones we never see coming. Imagine a world where the price of copper could topple empires. That's not fantasy, it's the story of the late Bronze Age collapse, a time when trade routes stretching from Greece to Egypt disintegrated like sandcastles in a storm. Around 1200 BCE, cities that had flourished for centuries, Mycenae, Ugarit, Hattusa, were suddenly abandoned or burned. No single invader was to blame. Instead, archaeologists find evidence of a far subtler killer: economic collapse. These civilizations didn't just trade goods, they depended on them. When the flow of tin for bronze dried up or ships stopped carrying grain, entire societies unraveled. Take the ancient port of Ugarit in modern-day Syria. Its merchants traded olive oil for Egyptian gold, Cypriot copper for Anatolian silver. Clay tablets from its final days revealed desperate letters, one merchant pleading for a shipment of grain that never came, another warning that the enemy's ships are already here. But who was the enemy? Pirates, drought, or something more insidious, a breakdown so total that trade itself became impossible? At sites across the Mediterranean, archaeologists find sunken ships from this era, their hulls still packed with cargo, as if merchants fled mid-voyage. The real danger wasn't just lost wealth. Bronze Age economies were hyper-specialized. Miners extracted ore, smiths forged weapons, farmers grew surplus crops, all relying on networks that stretched thousands of miles. When those connections snapped, knowledge itself vanished. In Greece, Linear B script disappeared for centuries, suggesting not just political collapse but a loss of the very tools needed to rebuild. A city might survive a bad harvest, but what happens when no one remembers how to repair irrigation systems or keep administrative records? Modern parallels are eerie. The 2008 financial crisis showed how interconnected markets can amplify disaster, but ancient trade lacked safety nets like central banks or insurance. A single drought in Anatolia could spike grain prices in Egypt, sparking unrest that disrupted tin shipments from Afghanistan, leaving armies without weapons. It wasn't just goods that stopped moving, ideas did too. Technological progress stalled for generations, yet some cities adapted. Byblos in Lebanon shifted from exporting cedar wood to producing purple dye, clinging to relevance. Others weren't so lucky. The ruins of Mycenaean palaces show storerooms once packed with olive oil jars now empty, their wealth evaporated like morning mist. Economic collapse doesn't just empty cities, it rewires human behavior. Why stay in a place where your skills are worthless? Why defend a system that can't feed your children? The lesson etched into these ruins is uncomfortably modern. Civilizations aren't undone by a single blow, but by a chain reaction, where the failure of one trade route, one harvest, one alliance cascades into oblivion. Walking through the rubble of these ancient trading hubs, you're left wondering, what networks do we rely on that, if severed, would leave our cities just as silent? Sometimes the most powerful force emptying a city isn't disaster or war, it's an idea. Across history, belief has moved mountains, toppled kings, and yes, abandoned cities. Picture a community not fleeing famine or invaders, but walking away because their gods whispered it was time. The ancestral pueblones of the American Southwest left behind cliff dwellings like Mesa Verde, not in panic, but in a slow, deliberate exodus. Archaeologists find tools neatly stored, doors sealed with care, as if awaiting a return that never came. Some scholars point to shifting religious practices. Tree ring data shows droughts coincided with their departure, but spiritual leaders may have interpreted environmental stress as divine displeasure, guiding their people toward new lands. Then there's Norse Greenland, where Viking settlers thrived for centuries before vanishing around the 15th century. Bones from their livestock reveal a grim story. Cows starving as winters grew harsher, their teeth worn down from chewing bark stripped from trees. Yet these were a people who'd survived lean times before. What changed? Letters from the last bishop of Greenland hint at a deeper crisis, not just of food, but of faith. As contact with Europe faded, so did the Church's influence. Facing isolation and a changing climate, did the Norse abandon their stone churches not because they couldn't stay, but because they no longer saw Greenland as their promised land? The Khmer Empire's retreat from Angkor Wat offers another tantalizing clue. This sprawling temple complex was the heart of a civilization that dominated Southeast Asia. Yet by the 16th century, the capital shifted south, leaving Angkor to the jungle. Traditional narratives blame Siamese invasions or failed hydraulics, but inscriptions tell a quieter story. A gradual shift from Hinduism to Theravada Buddhism, a faith less tied to grand temples and god-kings. Imagine a society where spirituality no longer demanded maintaining vast stone monuments where enlightenment could be found under a tree rather than in a palace. The city didn't collapse, it was quietly set aside like an outgrown shell. These abandonments challenge our obsession with catastrophe. They suggest that sometimes people don't just lose their cities, they outgrow them. When belief systems evolve, the very definition of home can change. A cliff dwelling might become a relic of the old ways. A Viking settlement could transform from a bold frontier to a forgotten outpost. And a sacred city, it might remain holy even as its streets empty, its purpose fulfilled not in permanence, but in the moment it shaped a people's soul. The stones stay silent, but the message echoes. Civilizations don't always fall. Sometimes they choose to walk into the unknown, carrying only what they still believe. When logic fails, legend rushes in. Some abandoned cities don't fit neatly into boxes labeled drought or war. Their stories are written in gaps so wide, they invite whispers of the uncanny. Take the case of Puma Punku in Bolivia, where precision-cut stone blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, lie scattered like a giant's abandoned puzzle. The sheer craftsmanship defies the tools archaeologists associate with its builders, the Tiwanaku culture. Could a lost technology, or something beyond human ingenuity, explain these ruins? It's easy to dismiss such questions as fringe, but they persist because conventional explanations often feel incomplete. When science hits a wall, mythology kicks down the door. The Bermuda Triangle of ancient abandonments might be the Yonaguni Monument off Japan's coast. Submerged stone structures with staircases and angular platforms suggest a city swallowed by the sea, except geologists debate whether they're man-made or a quirk of nature. Local legends speak of a land called Mu, a Pacific Atlantis that sank beneath the waves. While mainstream scholars attribute the site to natural erosion, the precision of the formations keeps the debate alive. What's fascinating isn't just the theory itself, but why it resonates. Humans are pattern seekers. We'd rather blame gods or aliens than accept that some mysteries might never unravel. Then there's the chilling tale of the Mary Celeste of cities, Roanoke, the infamous lost colony of 16th century America. Unlike ancient ruins, Roanoke's disappearance was documented and bizarre. Settlers left behind a single cryptic clue, the word Croatoan carved into a post. No bodies, no signs of struggle. over the centuries, theories spiraled from mundane integration with local tribes to macabre alien abductions. But the most enduring explanation isn't supernatural, it's psychological. Roanoke endures in pop culture because it mirrors our primal fear of being erased without a trace. A curse is more comforting than chaos. Even the Maya haven't escaped the supernatural treatment. Some suggest their abrupt departure from cities like Tikal was triggered by star portals or cosmic events. Never mind that archaeologists have painstakingly pieced together evidence of droughts and political strife. The allure of these theories lies in their simplicity. It's easier to imagine a single, spectacular catastrophe than to grapple with the slow, messy unraveling of societal fabric. But here's the twist. These supernatural narratives often reveal more about us than the past. When faced with the unknown, we'd rather invent gods, monsters, or interstellar visitors than confront the humbling truth that history is full of holes and some stories are lost forever. The real mystery isn't whether aliens built Puma Punku, it's why we're so desperate to believe they did. In the end, these abandoned cities hold up a mirror to our deepest anxieties about time, mortality, and the fragility of our own place in the universe. The stones may be silent, but our imaginations, they're louder than ever. Archaeologists don't just dig, they decode. Every abandoned city is a crime scene without witnesses, where broken pottery, layers of soil, and even ancient garbage become vital clues. Take something as simple as a cracked storage jar. To most, it's debris, but to an archaeologist, its position buried under collapsed roofing or left upright in a corner can reveal whether people fled suddenly or left with intention. In the ruins of Akrathi, the careful stacking of furniture before the volcanic eruption suggests an orderly evacuation. Meanwhile, at Cahokia, half-finished tools scattered across workbenches hint at a populace interrupted mid-task, as if disaster struck without warning. Soil holds secrets too. By analyzing sediment cores, scientists can read the Earth like a history book. In the Indus Valley, layers of silt point to catastrophic flooding, while in Mesoamerica, traces of pollen reveal when crops failed and famine likely followed. At Tel Leilan in Syria, a thick band of windblown dust abruptly ends the city's occupation layer, stark evidence of the drought that starved the Acadian Empire. But some clues are subtler. Chemical residues on cooking pots might show a sudden shift from grain to scavenged plants, signaling desperation. Even animal bones tell stories. The butchered remains of prized livestock in Mohenjo-Daro's final days suggest hunger so severe they ate their future. Yet not all puzzles yield to science. Consider the eerie case of Skara Brae, a Neolithic village in Scotland preserved under sand dunes. Its stone beds and shelves remain perfectly intact, as if the inhabitants stepped out for a moment. No weapons, no signs of conflict, just an emptiness that defies explanation. Here, archaeology hits its limits. Without written records or clear environmental trauma, some abandonments remain stubbornly opaque. That's where interdisciplinary work bridges the gap. Linguists decipher forgotten scripts like Linear B, while geneticists trace migrations through ancient DNA. In Turkey's Çatalhöyük, wall paintings hint at spiritual upheaval, offering glimpses into the minds of those who left. The greatest challenge lies in distinguishing cause from effect. A burned layer might mean invaders or a cooking fire gone wrong. A mass grave could point to plague, sacrifice, or warfare. At times, the absence of evidence is the most telling clue. The lack of human remains in Akrathi suggests foresight. The missing valuables in Hattusa imply planned retreat. Each site demands humility. For every 10 cities with clear-cut explanations, there's one like Great Zimbabwe, where even the builder's name is lost to time. What emerges from these fragments isn't just a reconstruction of the past, it's a testament to human resilience. The same ingenuity that built these cities also helped their inhabitants adapt or flee. Whether driven by drought, disease, or something we've yet to uncover, their choices echo across millennia. And as technology advances, LiDAR revealing jungle-shrouded metropolises, isotopic analysis tracing ancient diets, we edge closer to hearing their silenced voices. The puzzle isn't complete, but each unearthed shard brings us nearer to understanding the most universal truth of all. Civilizations, like people, rarely disappear without leaving something behind. Power rests on trust, and when that trust shatters, so too can a city. History is littered with civilizations where leadership failures didn't just weaken societies, but hastened their sudden unraveling. Consider the final days of the Khmer Empire at anchor. For centuries, its kings commanded vast irrigation networks that turned monsoon floods into agricultural abundance. Yet by the 15th century, inscriptions reveal a troubling shift. Instead of maintaining canals, elites diverted labor to build ever grander temples. As climate fluctuations strained water supplies, the ruling class doubled down on divine spectacle while farmers starved. The result, a capital abandoned not by invaders, but by citizens who simply walked away from leaders who'd stopped serving them. The Maya collapse offers an even starker lesson in leadership's fragility. Stele carvings depict kings performing sacred rituals to summon rain, yet when droughts persisted, their divine authority crumbled. At Capon, archaeologists found the last royal palace half-finished, its construction abruptly halted. Nearby, noble residences show signs of violent overthrow, their walls scorched by fire. Here, abandonment wasn't a single event, but a cascading failure. As faith in rulers waned, tribute systems collapsed, leaving cities without the resources to adapt. The eerie silence of places like Tikal speaks volumes when people believe their leaders can no longer protect them. Exile becomes survival, but not all governance failures are so dramatic. The Roman withdrawal from Britain in the 5th century left urban centers like Londinium vulnerable, without imperial administrators to coordinate repairs or distribute grain. Once bustling markets emptied within years. Crucially, this wasn't mass death, it was strategic retreat. Facing Saxon raids and broken supply chains, Britons chose rural safety over urban loyalty. Similar patterns emerge in the Indus Valley, where standardized weights and city grids suggest strong central planning until they don't. The gradual disappearance of civic infrastructure hints at a quiet crisis, a ruling class that lost either the will or the means to enforce order, leaving citizens to fend for themselves. Perhaps the most chilling examples come from the Moche of Peru. At the Huaca del Sol pyramid, archaeologists uncovered evidence of ritual killings during a climate crisis, elites sacrificing prisoners to appease gods while their own people starved. When drought worsened, the sacrifices grew more frequent, more desperate. Then, suddenly, they stopped. The message in the bones is unmistakable. A populace that once tolerated elite excess eventually reached its limit. The Moche didn't just abandon their cities, they abandoned the very idea of being ruled. Leadership collapses rarely happen in isolation. A king's missteps might go unnoticed in times of plenty, but when paired with famine or invasion, they become existential threats. That's the real lesson of these ruins. Societies can endure bad harvests or even wars. What they can't survive is the moment their people stop believing those in power deserve to lead. Whether through corruption, incompetence, or simply losing touch, rulers who fail their citizens don't just lose thrones. They empty cities, leaving behind stone monuments to the most dangerous illusion of all, that power is permanent. There's a grim irony in the way some civilizations dug their own graves. not with shovels but with sheer need. Take Easter Island, where towering stone moai statues stand as monuments to both human ingenuity and self-destruction. When Polynesian settlers arrived around 1200 AD, the island was covered in lush palm forests. Centuries later, those trees were gone, chopped down to transport and erect the very statues that made the island famous. Without trees to anchor the soil, erosion ravaged farmland. Without wood for canoes, fishing dwindled. By the time Europeans arrived in 1722, the islanders were starving, reduced to carving petroglyphs of seabirds they could no longer catch. The lesson is stark. A society that consumes its future has no future, but Easter Island isn't alone. The once fertile fields of Mesopotamia, cradle of the world's first cities, turned to salt-encrusted wasteland under the weight of irrigation. Ancient farmers channeled Tigris and Euphrates waters to their crops, unaware that evaporation would leave behind toxic mineral buildup. Over centuries, wheat yields plummeted. Cuneiform tablets from the city of Lagash lament the earth turned white, a poetic but devastating description of salinization. Unlike sudden disasters, this was a slow bleed, generations of farmers watching their land sicken until finally entire city-states became unsustainable. The very technology that birthed civilization, large-scale agriculture, became its undoing. Even hunting societies faced collapse from overexploitation. In North America's Chaco Canyon, the ancestral Pueblones relied on vast pine forests for roof beams in their monumental great houses. Dendrochronology reveals a chilling pattern. As construction peaked in the 1100s, trees were felled faster than they could regrow. By the time droughts hit, the landscape was stripped bare. No timber to repair roofs, no fuel for fires. But here's the twist: resource depletion rarely works alone. At Chaco, it intertwined with climate shifts and social strife, creating a death spiral where each crisis amplified the next. A city might survive one bad harvest, but not when its leaders have already burned through nature's safety net. Modern archaeology reveals how these collapses unfolded at a human scale. In the Maya city of Capon, analysis of animal bones shows deer populations shrinking over time, a sign of overhunting. Then suddenly, deer vanish from the record entirely, replaced by smaller, less nutritious game like rabbits and turtles. You can almost hear the desperation in that shift. Generations of feasts giving way to meals scraped from the forest floor. Similarly, in the American Southwest, Pakrat middens nests preserved for millennia showed juniper and pinon pine disappearing from diets as trees were overharvested. These aren't abstract ecological stats, they're grocery lists of decline written in bones and seeds. The most haunting abandonments are those where people saw the end coming. At Turkey's Çatalhöyük, one of the world's first cities, archaeologists found homes increasingly built from recycled materials, old plaster scavenged, timbers repurposed. It's the architectural equivalent of tightening your belt, a society stretching dwindling resources thinner and thinner, yet even then they clung to ritual. In the final layers, burial customs grow more elaborate, as if grasping for divine intervention. This duality, pragmatism and prayer, captures humanity's response to scarcity throughout history. We innovate until we can't, then hope until we must. What separates these stories from natural disasters is their preventable nature. A volcano gives no warning. Deforestation is a choice. Today, satellite imagery shows modern cities repeating ancient mistakes, aquifers drained faster than rains can replenish them, topsoil vanishing at alarming rates. The ruins of Easter Island and Mesopotamia aren't just relics, they're rehearsals. When a civilization measures progress in monuments rather than sustainability, it's already writing its own epitaph, one future archaeologists may puzzle over. just as we do now. Climate shifts have a way of rewriting human history in ways we're only beginning to understand. Take the Acadian Empire, which ruled over Mesopotamia for nearly 2 centuries until the rain stopped. Tree rings and sediment cores tell a story of a mega drought so severe it turned fertile plains to dust around 2200 BCE. But here's what's chilling: the empire didn't fade slowly. Ancient tablets describe cities emptying within a generation, their gates left open as people scattered like leaves in a dry wind. This wasn't just a bad harvest, it was a breaking point. When crops fail year after year, even the mightiest civilizations can unravel faster than a frayed rope. The Maya faced a similar reckoning, except their collapse played out in the suffocating humidity of the rainforest. For centuries, their cities thrived on predictable seasonal rains. Then, around the 9th century, those rains grew erratic. Pollen records show maize production plummeting as drought gripped the region. But the real crisis wasn't just the lack of water. It was the speed of the domino effect. Without crops, trade networks crumbled. Without trade, kings lost their ability to reward loyalty. And without loyalty, the social contract itself dissolved. In places like Capon, stelae that once celebrated royal births were left half-carved, as if the artisans dropped their chisels mid-stroke. Climate change didn't just starve the Maya, it erased their political order almost overnight. Then there's the haunting case of the Greenland Norse. For 400 years, they clung to their icy foothold, raising cattle in meadows that, thanks to the medieval warm period, were briefly lush. But when temperatures dropped during the Little Ice Age, their world shrank. Ice cores revealed the grim truth: winters grew longer, summers shorter. Yet the final blow wasn't the cold itself, it was how quickly their adaptations failed. Seal hunting techniques that worked for generations suddenly couldn't compensate for vanishing pastures. By the time they considered learning survival skills from the Inuit, it was too late. The last written record from the settlement is a wedding notice from 1408. After that, silence. What unites these stories is the terrifying lag between cause and effect. A society might adjust to a decade of poor harvests, but when the tipping point comes, it comes fast. In the American Southwest, the ancestral Puebloans survived droughts before, yet the one that struck in the 1300s was different. Tree rings show it wasn't just drier, it was hotter. Corn, their lifeline, withered in fields that had been fertile for centuries. At Mesa Verde, archaeologists find cobs so stunted they'd fit in a child's hand. But the abandonment itself, that happened in a matter of years, rooms sealed shut with care, yet no one returned to open them. The lesson etched into these ruins isn't just about climate, it's about human nature. We're wired to respond to immediate threats, not slow-moving crises. A volcano erupting or an army attacking triggers flight, but a degree less rain each year. That's easy to ignore until the day the granaries are empty. Today, as we chart rising seas and shifting weather patterns, these ancient collapses whisper a warning. The real danger isn't the change itself, but how suddenly the threads of civilization can snap when stretched too far. The past shows us that climate rarely kills cities directly. It just strips away their margins for error, leaving them one bad year away from oblivion. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was its resilience. While many ancient cities vanished into dust, others rose from their own ashes like phoenixes. The Eternal City itself suffered sacks, plagues, and even temporary abandonment during the Gothic Wars of the 6th century, yet it always clawed its way back. What separates these comeback stories from ghost cities like Cahokia or Tikal? The answer lies in something deeper than bricks and mortar. It's about adaptability woven into the very fabric of a place. Take Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire. When plague wiped out nearly half its population in 542, the city didn't collapse, it transformed. Abandoned neighborhoods were repurposed as gardens, while surviving merchants pivoted from luxury goods to essentials. Even the mighty Hagia Sophia, built at staggering cost, found new life as a mosque after the Ottoman conquest. Compare that to Angkor Wat, where the Khmer elite clung to outdated water management systems until the jungle reclaimed their streets. The lesson: cities that survive aren't just lucky, they're flexible, willing to shed old identities when circumstances demand. Geography plays a role too. Look at Lisbon, devastated by an earthquake in 1755 that killed thousands and leveled palaces. Its revival wasn't just about rebuilding, it was about reimagining. Architects designed wider streets to prevent future firestorms, while the Marquis of Pombal enforced strict new construction codes. Contrast that with Pompeii, frozen in time because its volcanic burial made resurrection impossible. Strategic location matters. Cities along trade routes like Aleppo or Samarkand could reinvent themselves as commerce shifted, while isolated outposts like Norse Greenland had no economic lifelines when the climate turned. But perhaps the most overlooked factor is collective memory. Jerusalem has been destroyed at least twice, besieged 23 times, and captured 44 times, yet it endures. Why? Because its significance transcends physical structures. Pilgrims, scholars, and conquerors kept its identity alive even when its buildings lay in ruins. Meanwhile, great Zimbabwe stone towers, though magnificent, lacked that cultural continuity. Without stories passed down or written records, its purpose faded into mystery. The real test comes when disaster strikes. After the Mongols razed Baghdad in 1258, survivors didn't just rebuild, they recentered the city around new institutions like the Mustansiriya Madrasa, ensuring knowledge would outlast future invasions. Detroit's modern decline shows the flip side. When industries left, the city struggled to redefine itself because its identity was too tied to a single economic engine. History's comeback cities share one trait: they treated crises as opportunities to evolve, not just recover. Wandering through Rome today, you'll find medieval churches built into ancient temples, Renaissance palazzos atop Roman forums. Each layer isn't just reconstruction, it's reinvention. That's the secret written in stone across resilient cities. The past can be a foundation, but survival demands the courage to build something new atop it. While ghost cities whisper warnings, these phoenix metropolises roar a defiant truth: collapse isn't destiny. It's a challenge waiting for the right combination of geography, memory, and human ingenuity to answer back. Consider the Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old Greek device so advanced, it took modern scholars decades to understand its purpose as an astronomical calculator. This intricate bronze gear system, recovered from a shipwreck, hints at a level of technological sophistication the ancient world wasn't supposed to possess. And yet, for centuries after its creation, nothing like it appears in the historical record. It's as if the knowledge behind it simply evaporated. This isn't an isolated case. Across abandoned cities, we find echoes of forgotten wisdom that might have been the difference between survival and collapse. Take the mysterious Kanat systems of Persia, underground tunnels that tapped into mountain aquifers to irrigate deserts. These engineering marvels sustained cities like Pasargadae for millennia until maintenance lapsed and the tunnels silted up. Without the specialized knowledge to repair them, entire regions became uninhabitable. Similarly, the Mayas' intricate rainwater reservoirs at Tikal functioned flawlessly for centuries, until the keepers of that hydraulic knowledge either died or fled during droughts. When a society loses its engineers, it's not just skills that disappear, it's the ability to adapt to crises. Some gaps in our understanding are more unsettling. The sudden abandonment of Çatalhöyük, one of humanity's first cities, coincides with strange shifts in art and burial practices. Wall paintings transition from vibrant hunting scenes to eerie geometric patterns, while skeletons show unusual bone markings. Was this a spiritual crisis, a forgotten plague, or some psychological tipping point we can't decipher without their lost narratives? The silence is deafening. Even the Indus Valley's undeciphered script taunts us thousands of inscribed seals that might hold explanations for their urban exodus, if only we could read them. Then there are the disasters we can't see. Modern LiDAR scans reveal ancient Amazonian cities surrounded by terra preta, fertile, dark earth deliberately created through techniques now lost. These soils sustained populations comparable to medieval Europe, yet the methods behind them vanished with the civilizations that perfected them. Could similar agricultural secrets have sustained other lost cities? The abrupt desertion of Cambodia's Mahendraparvata in the 9th century hints at this possibility. Inscriptions boast of harvests so abundant they fed armies, yet soil samples show rapid depletion. Did their prosperity depend on a fragile technique that failed when climate shifted? The most haunting losses might be the ones we don't even recognize. Roman concrete, which self-repairs cracks, was only recently reverse-engineered by scientists. How many other innovations crumbled into dust because no one preserved the recipes? When the Library of Alexandria burned, it wasn't just books that vanished, it was entire disciplines, from Babylonian astronomy to Phoenician navigation. These weren't just collections of facts, they were toolkits for survival. What emerges from these fragments is a humbling truth. Civilizations aren't just built on resources, but on the collective knowledge of how to use them. Lose that, and even the grandest cities become skeletons waiting for the final gust of wind. The real mystery isn't always why people left, it's what they took with them that will never recover. Every abandoned metropolis whispers the same warning. Progress isn't a ladder, but a fragile thread, easily severed by time, disaster, or simple forgetfulness. And once broken, some knots can never be tied again. The ruins of ancient cities might seem like relics of a distant past, but the forces that emptied them haven't disappeared, they've evolved. Look at modern megacities where rising sea levels threaten coastal hubs from Miami to Mumbai, or desertification creeps toward places like Phoenix and Cape Town. The same climate shifts that starved the Acadians or scattered the Maya now loom over our own food systems. But here's the unsettling difference. While ancient civilizations collapsed in isolation, today's world is a tightly woven web. A drought in Brazil can spike coffee prices globally. A flood in Thailand might paralyze electronics manufacturing. Our interdependence isn't just a strength, it's a vulnerability waiting for the right domino to fall. Pandemics offer another chilling parallel. When the Black Death swept through medieval Europe, it took decades for populations to recover. Modern medicine gives us an edge, yet COVID-19 revealed how quickly supply chains can fray and hospitals buckle under pressure. The abandoned streets of Hamanmangha, where Neolithic villagers succumbed to an unknown plague, remind us that pathogens don't need malice to be lethal, just opportunity. And with deforestation pushing wildlife into human habitats, the risk of new zoonotic diseases grows. The lesson isn't just about healthcare systems, it's about whether we've built societies resilient enough to endure the next invisible threat. Economic instability, too, echoes across millennia. The late Bronze Age collapse showed how interconnected trade networks can amplify disaster, a lesson mirrored in 2008's financial crisis or the semiconductor shortages that recently stalled car production worldwide. Ancient Ugarit merchants pleaded for grain shipments that never came. Today, A single blocked canal in Suez sends shockwaves through global shipping. The difference is scale, not substance. When money, goods, or energy stop flowing, urban life doesn't adapt, it fractures. Yet the most profound lesson isn't in the threats themselves, but in how societies respond. The Greenland Norse starved rather than adopt Inuit fishing techniques. The Khmer elite kept building temples while their canals silted up. Resistance to change is a luxury no civilization can afford. Today, some cities are adapting Rotterdam's floating neighborhoods, Singapore's vertical farms, while others double down on unsustainable paths. The ghosts of Cahokia and Angkor Wat whisper a warning: collapse rarely comes from external forces alone. It's the refusal to pivot that seals a city's fate. Perhaps the real question isn't whether modern cities could fall, but whether we're heeding history's quietest lesson. Abandoned cities weren't failed experiments, they were test runs. Their ruins aren't just cautionary tales, they're blueprints for survival. The choice isn't between progress and preservation, but between learning and repeating. After all, the one threat ancient civilizations never faced was knowing how others had fallen before them. We don't have that excuse. Popular culture loves a good mystery, especially when it comes to ancient cities, abandoned dinner tables, half-written letters, streets frozen in time. But how much of what we think we know is fact, and how much is Hollywood-fueled fiction? The truth often lies somewhere between the sensational and the mundane. Take the famous overnight abandonments. Most weren't as sudden as legends suggest. Archaeologists at Cahokia, for instance, found layers of debris showing gradual decline before the final departure. Yet the image of a bustling city emptying in a single day persists because it's dramatic, visceral. Reality is messier. One enduring myth is that these cities were left pristine, as if their inhabitants vanished into thin air. In truth, many sites show signs of deliberate dismantling. At Mesa Verde, ancestral pueblones carefully sealed doors with stone slabs, suggesting planned relocation, not panic. Similarly, the Maya didn't just flee to Col, they took valuables with them, leaving behind only what was too heavy or unimportant. The idea of a time capsule city is seductive, but it overlooks the practicality of people who knew they might not return. Then there's the trope of supernatural explanations, aliens, curses, or star portals. While these make for gripping documentaries, the evidence points to earthly struggles. The collapse of the Indus Valley cities, once blamed on mythical floods, now aligns with geological proof of river shifts. Even the lost colony of Roanoke, long shrouded in speculative theories, has a plausible explanation: integration with local tribes, supported by DNA traces in nearby communities. The real story isn't less fascinating, it's just human. Perhaps the most misleading myth is that these collapses were inevitable. Films portray doomed civilizations blindly marching toward ruin, but history shows adaptability until the breaking point. The Greenland Norse clung to European farming methods despite worsening cold, but the Maya, they tried everything, digging deeper wells, shifting crops, even altering rituals to beg for rain. Their downfall wasn't ignorance, it was the limits of their era's science. So why do these myths endure? Because they simplify chaos into narrative. It's easier to imagine a single catastrophic event than to grapple with the slow unraveling of drought, bad harvests, and fraying trust. But when we strip away the fantasy, what remains is more compelling: the resilience of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. The next time you hear about a city abandoned overnight, remember, the truth isn't in the silence of the ruins, but in the echoes of the choices made long before the last footsteps faded. Some mysteries refuse to stay buried, no matter how many centuries pass. Among the most baffling is the Roanoke colony, England's first attempt at a permanent settlement in the Americas. In 1587, over 100 men, women, and children vanished without a trace, leaving behind a single cryptic clue, the word Croatoan carved into a wooden post. For centuries, theories ranged from massacre to alien abduction, but modern archaeology tells a subtler story. Recent excavations on Hatteras Island, historically home to the Croatoan people, reveal European artifacts mixed with indigenous tools, a tantalizing hint that the colonists may have integrated with the locals. Yet the full truth remains just out of reach, like a shadow dissolving in moonlight. Then there's Helike, the ancient Greek city that vanished overnight in 373 BCE. Ancient texts describe a catastrophic earthquake followed by a tsunami that dragged the entire city beneath the waves. For over 2,000 years, scholars debated whether Helike was myth or reality until the 1990s, when archaeologists discovered its ruins buried under coastal sediment. The eerie part, the city wasn't just submerged, it was perfectly preserved with walls still standing and pottery intact, as if frozen in a single moment of terror. Yet even now, we don't know why Helike's fate was so uniquely brutal. Other earthquake-struck cities rebuilt, but Helike became a cautionary tale, its name whispered in Greek tragedies as a warning from the gods. Far older and even more enigmatic is the lost city of Tenya, founded by Trojan prisoners of war according to legend. Thriving for centuries as a wealthy trade hub, it mysteriously faded from records by the 6th century CE. When archaeologists finally uncovered its ruins in 2018, they found a sprawling metropolis with Roman baths and intricate mosaics, but no signs of violent destruction or gradual decline. The abandonment was so orderly, it's as if the citizens simply agreed to leave. Some speculate religious persecution forced them out, others point to shifting trade routes. The truth, Tenya's silence is as deliberate as its disappearance. Perhaps the most haunting case is the Tarim mummies of China's Taklamakan Desert. These incredibly preserved corpses, some over 4,000 years old, wear woven woolens and tall hats resembling those of Bronze Age Europeans. Their very existence defies logic. How did people with Caucasian features end up in one of Asia's most remote deserts? DNA analysis links them to ancient Siberian and Iranian populations, but their language and culture remain indecipherable. The settlements around them show no signs of conflict or famine, just empty homes where life once thrived. Were they traders who lost their way? A lost tribe fleeing some forgotten catastrophe? The desert guards its secrets fiercely. What ties these cases together isn't just their unsolved nature, it's the way they challenge our assumptions about history. We're used to tidy narratives of conquest or disaster, but these disappearances refuse to conform. They hint at possibilities we're only beginning to consider. Societies that chose to vanish, cultures that dissolved into others, or tragedies so complete they erased even the memory of their victims. With every technological advance, LiDAR scans, isotopic analysis, genetic testing, we peel back another layer of the mystery. Yet some cities seem determined to keep their stories to themselves, as if the past itself is resisting our scrutiny. The greatest lesson they offer might be humility. For all our tools and knowledge, some silences are meant to endure. When a city empties, the people don't just vanish into thin air, they scatter, leaving faint trails like breadcrumbs across the landscape. Take the Maya, whose great cities like Tikal and Kapon fell silent by the 9th century. At first glance, it seems like a total collapse, but pollen samples tell another story. In Belize's coastal regions and Guatemala's highlands, agricultural activity spiked right as the inland cities declined. Farmers didn't disappear, they adapted, shifting to wetter areas where rains were more reliable. Some even brought their traditions with them. Archaeologists find Maya-style pottery in places like Sable, a smaller settlement that thrived as the grand capitals crumbled. The ancestral pueblos of the American Southwest followed a similar pattern. When drought made Mesa Verde unsustainable, families didn't perish, they migrated south. Modern Pueblo tribes like the Hopi and Zuni trace their ancestry to these very migrants, preserving oral histories that speak of a gradual journey to the middle place, where water was plentiful. Physical evidence backs this up. Ceramic designs from abandoned cliff dwellings reappear in villages along the Rio Grande, like a cultural fingerprint linking past and present. Sometimes, though, migration leaves stranger clues. In Turkey's Çatalhöyük, one of the world's earliest cities, researchers noticed something odd in the final layers. Homes weren't just abandoned, they were meticulously filled in with rubble, almost like ceremonial closures. Nearby, smaller villages suddenly expanded, their architecture mirroring Çatalhöyük's distinctive layout. It's as if the entire community decided together to dissolve their urban experiment and return to a simpler life. No invasion, no famine, just a collective choice to walk away from city living. Then there are the cases where migration becomes conquest. The Hittites, after abandoning their capital Hattusa, didn't fade into obscurity. Linguistic and genetic evidence suggests they resurfaced as the Neo-Hittite states in Syria, their language blending with Aramaic while their stone carving traditions endured. This wasn't a retreat, it was a reinvention, proving that even fallen empires can leave lasting echoes. But tracking these movements isn't always straightforward. The Indus Valley people left no written records, yet their influence ripples across later South Asian cultures. Seals and weights from Harappa turn up in Mesopotamian trade ports, hinting at far-flung connections. Meanwhile, in Oman, graves contain pottery identical to Indus styles, proof that some may have sailed west when their rivers ran dry. The most haunting migrations are the ones we can only guess at. Greenland's Norse colonists had two settlements, the larger western one which collapsed and the smaller eastern which held on slightly longer. Did some attempt to sail back to Iceland? A single Icelandic chronicle mentions a ship arriving with wild-looking passengers who spoke Norse but dressed like the Inuit. Were these the last Greenlanders transformed by survival? Without more evidence, their fate remains half a story, whispered between the lines of history. Migration isn't just about survival, it's about identity. When people leave a city, they carry more than belongings. They take languages, rituals, and ways of seeing the world. That's why the ghost cities haunt us. They're not just empty spaces, they're unfinished sentences, stories interrupted mid-chapter. And sometimes, if we follow the clues carefully enough, we can find where the next chapter began. Legends aren't just stories, they're time capsules, preserving truths in the guise of myth. Consider the flood narratives found in cultures worldwide, from Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh to the Bible's Noah. For centuries, these were dismissed as allegory until archaeologists uncovered evidence of catastrophic flooding in ancient Sumer. Layers of silt at and Shuruppak match the timing of the legends, suggesting these tales encoded real disasters that forced cities to abandon their homes. The same pattern appears in the Andes, where Inca legends speak of a great deluge that sent people fleeing to the mountains. Modern sediment studies reveal massive glacial floods around 15,000 years ago, events so traumatic they etched themselves into collective memory for millennia. But flood myths aren't the only whispers from the past. The Greek legend of Atlantis, first recorded by Plato, has long been debated as fiction. Yet when archaeologists explored Santorini's buried Minoan city of Akrathi, they found eerie parallels, an advanced civilization obliterated by a volcanic eruption, its ruins preserved under ash. Plato's description of circular cities and sudden destruction now reads less like fantasy and more like a distorted memory of a real catastrophe. Even the detail about Atlantis sinking into the sea aligns with Santorini's caldera collapse, which triggered tsunamis that ravaged coastal cities across the Mediterranean. Coincidence or a story passed down through generations, warped by time but rooted in truth? War leaves scars in folklore too. The Mahabharata, an ancient Indian epic, describes a city called Devaraka swallowed by the ocean. For years, scholars assumed it was pure mythology until marine archaeologists discovered submerged ruins off Gujarat's coast. Stone walls, pottery, and even ancient anchors match descriptions from the text, dating to the same era the epic was set. The curse that supposedly drowned the city might encode a historical event, rising sea levels or a tsunami that forced evacuation. Similarly, Norse sagas recount the Greenland colony's demise in supernatural terms, blaming harsh winters on witchcraft and vengeful spirits. Strip away the magic and you're left with a stark reality. A society collapsing under climate shifts it couldn't comprehend, framed as divine punishment. Curses, too, often hide practical truths. The Temple of Doom aura surrounding Cambodia's Angkor Wat stems from tales of workers struck by illness during early excavations. Modern science offers a simpler explanation. Stagnant water in the moats bred malaria-carrying mosquitoes. The curse was biology, not mysticism. Likewise, Native American oral histories describe starving times when ancestors abandoned pueblos, echoing tree ring data showing severe droughts. These stories weren't just folklore, they were survival guides warning future generations where not to build. The most haunting examples blur the line between memory and prophecy. The Hopi speak of Sipapuni, a subterranean world their ancestors emerged from before settling in the southwest. Geologists now recognize this as a possible metaphor for migrations through cave systems during droughts. Even more striking are Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories describing coastal landscapes from 10,000 years ago, details that align with pre-Ice Age shorelines now underwater. These narratives weren't just poetic, they were oral maps preserving knowledge of lands lost to rising seas. What emerges is a pattern. When societies face existential threats, they encode the trauma in stories. A volcanic eruption becomes a wrathful god. A failing harvest transforms into a broken taboo. These myths aren't lies, they're adaptations, ensuring the lesson outlives the event. The real magic isn't in the supernatural elements, but in how accurately these tales preserve warnings across generations. Today, as we piece together ancient abandonments, we're not just digging up pottery and bones. We're deciphering a code, one where every monster, flood, or curse might just be a distorted reflection of something all too real. The past didn't vanish. It went underground, hiding in plain sight within the stories we never stopped telling. The trowels and brushes of traditional archaeology are being joined by tools that would seem like science fiction to earlier generations of researchers. Imagine peering through dense jungle canopies without setting foot on the ground, or extracting entire genetic histories from a single tooth. LiDAR technology, which uses laser pulses to map terrain, has revealed sprawling Maya metropolises hidden for centuries under Guatemalan rainforests, cities with causeways, reservoirs, and even ball courts invisible to the naked eye. In Cambodia, the same technique exposed Mahendraparvata, a lost Angkor-era city complete with temples and canals, rewriting our understanding of the Khmer Empire's reach. These aren't just incremental discoveries, they're seismic shifts, proving how much we've underestimated ancient urban planning. But the revolution goes beyond mapping. Ancient DNA analysis is unraveling migration patterns that textbooks got wrong for decades. Take the case of Britain's post-Roman era. skeletal remains from early medieval graves contain genetic signatures from as far as Central Asia, proving migration waves far more complex than the simple Anglo-Saxon invasion narrative. Similarly, isotopic analysis of teeth measuring chemical signatures locked in dental enamel can trace a person's movements from childhood to death. A Viking skeleton found in Norway with oxygen isotopes matching the Mediterranean. Proof of travel or trade networks spanning continents. These techniques don't just fill gaps, they rewrite entire chapters of human history. Even the humblest artifacts are getting high-tech makeovers. Portable X-ray fluorescence devices can now analyze pottery or metalwork on-site, instantly revealing where materials were sourced. In the Mediterranean, this exposed a vast Bronze Age tin trade stretching from Cornwall to the Levant, explaining how disparate cultures suddenly mastered bronze metallurgy simultaneously. Meanwhile, AI algorithms sift through thousands of satellite images, flagging subtle terrain anomalies that might indicate buried structures. In the deserts of Iraq, this method pinpointed thousands of previously unknown Assyrian canals and forts, sketching the bones of an empire thought lost to erosion. Yet every answer spawns new mysteries. When researchers sequenced DNA from Chichen Itza's sacrificial victims, they found a startling pattern. Many were young boys, all closely related. The discovery upended theories about Maya ritual practices, but also left us wondering why kinship mattered so profoundly in their ceremonies. Similarly, when ground-penetrating radar uncovered a hidden chamber beneath Tutankhamun's tomb, it reignited debates about Nefertiti's possible burial site, proving that even the most studied ruins still hold secrets. The most profound impact might be on timescales. Accelerator mass spectrometry now dates organic materials with pinpoint accuracy, shrinking error margins from centuries to decades. In Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, this revealed that the world's oldest temple predated agriculture by millennia, forcing us to reconsider which came first, organized religion or settled farming. Meanwhile, climate models reconstructed from ice cores and sediment layers let us see ancient droughts through the eyes of those who lived them, like the Acadians watching their fields turn to dust 4,000 years ago. But technology has its limits. The Indus Valley script remains undeciphered despite machine learning algorithms crunching every possible symbol combination. And for all our tools, some questions resist quantification. What dreams did the builders of Cahokia's mounds carry? What songs echoed in Teotihuacan's plazas? The danger isn't just in what we might miss, but in assuming data alone can resurrect lost worlds. The true power of these tools lies not in replacing old methods, but in weaving them together, letting satellite images guide shovels, letting DNA steer the interpretation of pottery styles. The past isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation across time, where every new tool adds another voice to the chorus. There's something undeniably magnetic about the ruins of a forgotten city, the way they linger on the edges of our consciousness, pulling us back again and again. It's not just historians or archaeologists who obsess over these places. They've seeped into our collective imagination, fueling blockbuster movies, best-selling novels, and even entire video game worlds. Think of the crumbling skyscrapers of The Last of Us or the eerie silence of Shadow of the Colossus. These virtual landscapes tap into the same unease that draws us to real-life ruins like Machu Picchu or Petra. But why? What is it about abandonment that resonates so deeply? Part of it is the sheer romance of the unknown. A city left intact but empty is a blank canvas for our imaginations. We project our own stories onto those silent streets, fantasies of discovery, of apocalypse, of lost civilizations waiting to be decoded. It's no coincidence that so many abandoned cities become settings for treasure hunts or dystopian tales. They're physical manifestations of the what-if questions that haunt us. What if we vanished tomorrow? What would remain of us? The ruins of Angkor Wat, swallowed by jungle yet still standing, offer a glimpse into that thought experiment. They're mirrors held up to our own fragility, yet there's also a darker allure, one tied to our fascination with disaster. Abandoned cities are the aftermath without the bloodshed, the collapse without the gore. Pompeii's plaster casts of victims are poignant, but it's the untouched bakeries and graffiti-covered walls that make the tragedy feel intimate. We're drawn to these places because they let us flirt with catastrophe at a safe distance. A video game player can wander the post-apocalyptic ruins of Fallout without fearing radiation. A documentary viewer can ponder Cahokia's fate without experiencing hunger. It's disaster tourism stripped of real stakes, but perhaps the most profound connection is the way these ruins force us to confront time itself. Modern life moves at a breakneck pace, yet abandoned cities exist outside that rhythm. Walking through the overgrown plazas of Tikal or the wind-scoured stones of Great Zimbabwe, you're confronted with the weight of centuries' proof that even the grandest human achievements are fleeting. That's why they appear so often in art and music, from the melancholy ruins in Caspar David Friedrich's paintings to the haunting lyrics of songs like The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. They're memento mori for entire civilizations, and then there's the puzzle aspect. Humans are natural detectives, and abandoned cities are the ultimate cold cases. The mystery of Roanoke or the Indus Valley's silent script taps into our love of riddles. Every new discovery, whether it's a LiDAR scan revealing hidden Maya structures or a DNA analysis tracing the fate of Greenland's Norse, feels like a clue in an epic whodunit. We're not just passive observers, we're participants in the story, piecing together fragments across time. Ultimately, these ruins endure in our culture because they're more than relics. They're conversations with the past, with our own mortality, and with the future we're building. When we imagine ourselves wandering those empty streets, we're not just exploring history. We're rehearsing for whatever comes next. The abandoned cities of the past stand as silent sentinels, whispering a truth we often forget. No civilization, no matter how grand, is immune to the tides of time. From the overgrown temples of Angkor Wat to the wind-scoured mounds of Cahokia, these ruins are more than archaeological curiosities. They're mirrors reflecting our own vulnerabilities. The Mayas' mastery of astronomy couldn't shield them from drought, just as the Acadians' vast trade networks couldn't stave off the hunger of a changing climate. These weren't failures of imagination or effort, they were collisions between human ambition and forces beyond any ruler's control. Yet within these collapses lies a paradox. The same fragility that doomed these cities also reveals their resilience. The people of Çatalhöyük didn't vanish, they adapted, dispersing into smaller communities. The Indus Valley's urban dwellers likely migrated, carrying their culture into new landscapes. Even in abandonment, there's continuity, proof that societies don't truly end, they transform. This duality is what makes these sites so compelling. They're not just cautionary tales of collapse, but testaments to human ingenuity in the face of the unimaginable. Modern cities would do well to listen. As rising seas lap at Miami's shores and desertification creeps toward Phoenix, we're grappling with challenges eerily familiar to the ancients. But we have one advantage they lacked: hindsight. LiDAR scans and ice cores have given us the tools to read Earth's history like a playbook, showing us where others faltered. The lesson isn't to fear collapse, but to recognize its ingredients: rigidity, inequality, short-term thinking, and actively resist them. Rotterdam builds floating neighborhoods, Singapore farms vertically in skyscrapers. These aren't just innovations, they're acts of defiance against the cycles of history. Perhaps the greatest gift these lost cities offer is humility. Walking among their ruins, we're forced to confront the arrogance of permanence. The Hittites never imagined their capital would be a tourist stop, just as the builders of Great Zimbabwe didn't foresee their walls inspiring museum exhibits. Our own glass towers and smart cities may one day be curiosities for future archaeologists, puzzles to piece together. That's not pessimism, it's perspective. So as we sign off, we're left with a question not about the past but the future. What will we learn from these whispers in the stones? Will we heed the warnings etched into abandoned plazas and dried-up canals? Or will we assume our technology makes us invincible, repeating mistakes as old as civilization itself? The choice is ours. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, and right now, the rhythm feels unmistakable. If you've enjoyed this journey through time, hit like, subscribe, and join the conversation below. Which abandoned city story resonates most with you? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember, the past isn't just behind us, it's all around us if we know where